Hi everybody, welcome to our webinar this evening. Just wait for the participant number to go up a little bit and then we can get going. Hope you've all been having a really great day today. It's been grey and miserable here. I think I'm going to kick off with my introduction while I wait for people to come in so we don't waste any time getting to questions with the Mother Tongues team. So good evening everyone, I'm Jess from BFI Network. Welcome to this Network and Film Hub Midlands webinar with the team behind the exciting new Mother Tongues Award. I'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. On your Zoom screen you will see that there's a chat box. You can talk to one another in there. We'll drop any relevant links, anything that comes up in the course of the conversation, maybe the guidelines for the award, that sort of thing. We'll pop them in the chat box. My colleague Alex from Film Hub Midlands, she's going to be in there, so you can chat to her as well. There's also a Q&A box, which I think will be really useful for this webinar. You can ask any questions that you'd like to put to the panelists in there. Please be sure to put them in the Q&A box and not into the chat. That just makes it really helpful for us when we get to the Q&A. We usually get lots of questions from the audience, so we might not be able to get around to everybody's question, but do please engage if you have a question. So I'm going to kick off by introducing you now to the Mother Tongues team. We've got Manon, Chiara, and Jack. Turn their cameras on. There they are. Hi, guys.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. Thanks for joining us. So just to start with then, you are the masterminds behind the new award. So can we start by just introducing you? Who will we start with? Manon, do you want to kick off?
Sure. Hi, yeah, my name is Manon. I'm a producer originally from France, based in the UK for the past 15 years. And I produced God's Own Country by Francis Lee with Jack a few years ago, and then set up a company called Ardimages UK. And I'm now working on this company with Chiara, my producing partner. And the three of us have joined forces for this new initiative, as you said.
Chiara, hand over to you.
Yes, so I'm Chiara, I'm also a producer. I work with Manon. We've been working together for 3 years, and I am originally from Italy, but I've also been here for 13 years.
Brilliant. And Jack?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jack. So I was born and raised in the UK, and I'm also a producer, so it's really 3 producers joining forces to launch this program. So yeah, I also produced God's Own Country with Manon, and another film called Await Further Instructions, which is a sci-fi horror film, and various shorts and other things that I've line produced along the way.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much. So you've all clearly been working together for quite a while already. So can you tell me a bit about the origins of this project? How did it come about? What was the initial idea? What were you trying to address with it? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll take it back a little bit. I think the original inspiration for it, it took a little while for the idea to come together, but I went out to South Africa in summer 2019, I think it was, because I was working on a project that was, or that is set there. And I went to the Durban Film Festival to meet with various South African producers and directors, and attended lots of panels at the film festival. And something that became really apparent was that one of the key questions facing any South African filmmaker was, what language should we tell our story in? So they speak several languages in South Africa. They speak English, or some people do, They speak Afrikaans, but there are also several tribal languages, some of the most prominent being Xhosa and Zulu. So some stories will naturally lend themselves to being told maybe all in Zulu, or one might be told in partly in Afrikaans, partly in English. But there are lots of projects where actually, there's a choice to be made by the filmmakers, and that choice comes with, implications. So there are, considerations around authenticity. There are considerations around the market reach of those projects. So classically speaking, people might say, well, if we do our film in English, it's got a chance of maybe reaching a slightly wider audience outside South Africa. But I would say that's really only if the film is strong that it's going to appeal. For other filmmakers, they might feel that it's much more authentic to make their film in one of the other languages that's spoken in the country. And where the dynamic becomes really interesting there is that there might only be a few million Zulu or Xhosa speakers, for example. But if you are producing your film in another language than English in South Africa, then suddenly you become eligible for the what used to be the Foreign Language Academy Awards, which is now called the International Feature Film category. So the argument about the film being made in English, the commerciality kind of swings right back around again, because suddenly you make yourself eligible for this very high profile opportunity if you become the South African submission. So there was such an interesting debate and tension between, a positive tension between, the filmmakers and the people making those projects and the path they had to navigate. And it just sort of made me think that in England or the UK, I just don't imagine that most people sit down and think, what language should we, tell this story in? But we would like to question that. As some of our researchers pointed out, there are so many languages spoken in the UK. It's one of the most diverse places in the world. And also, of course, several of those languages are actually indigenous languages as well. So it kind of sparked an idea. And early on, I then, to be completely honest, I learned languages at school, and I continued with my French and my Spanish into my A-levels, but that feels like a really long time ago now, and I haven't had that much opportunity to keep up my speaking of those languages. So it's not that I'm some amazing linguist, but I thought there was an interesting idea there, and then I felt that I would, it would be a really good idea to discuss this with people that actually do speak other languages fluently, and for whom English is, I think, second, and maybe in Chiara's case even third language. So I was really keen to find a project to do again with Manon and with Chiara. So we began speaking at that point, and then we started to wrestle with all of the many different considerations in terms of how best you would put something like this together.
Sounds great. Well, they clearly liked the pitch for the award, because they're still here with it now. So what exactly is it? What can filmmakers apply for?
Okay, so the Mother Tongues Award is a development award for UK-based filmmakers who have projects at treatment or at script stage that are set in the UK, and in which the dialogue of the story is going to be in any language other than English. And it's what the filmmakers can apply for is a development award that will be monetary, in the sense that we have an award of £10,000 to help with the development of the project. So to go from treatment to script stage, or from a first draft of the script to a second and even a production ready draft, and support from us, so development support from us as producers, but also support from our distribution partners, Shudder and Curzon, which is something extremely rare, especially for projects at such an early stage.
Sounds great. Thanks. And who exactly are you looking for? Who's it aimed at?
So the idea is to find projects that are set in the UK. So that was one of the questions already, but in a language other than English. We want, as filmmakers, we want to work on projects that are authentic. So we want the people who apply for this award to have a meaningful connection to the language. Obviously, like as an immigrant myself, like you have that immediate connection to another story when you're an immigrant. But we also want to involve second generation immigrants, for instance, who don't speak the language of their grandparents or great grandparents, but would still feel really strongly about telling stories in these languages. Or people who have married with someone who is from a different community than theirs and is therefore really connected to that world. So to apply, you don't necessarily have to speak the language. I'm also thinking about, for instance, the indigenous languages that Jack mentioned. So if your great-grandparents spoke Welsh, but you were never taught Welsh, you might still want to be able to tell a story that is about that culture and that heritage that is part of your work as a filmmaker. And of course, also another interesting way to speak is sign language. And there are some really fascinating examples. The one that we love to reference is The Tribe, which is a film from Ukraine that is entirely in sign language with no subtitles. But actually, when you go with it, you totally understand it. And I think, yeah, it's just important for the people who apply to really understand why they want to tell that story in that specific language. So for instance, if I was going to apply, it would make probably more sense for me to think I want to tell a story about the French community. But I also have Argentinian heritage and I've worked on 3 films set in Venezuela. So I could also potentially argue that I really want to tell something about the Venezuelan or the Argentinian community in London from that connection. But my Spanish is not as good as my French. And something that actually we would also provide is translation support down the line, if needed. Obviously, if the person speaks the language, well, we'll see in translation for us, but that's something that we can look into on a project per project basis. And I think it's important to say about, like who the award is aimed at is someone who, as I say, like as an immigrant, is very clear. Like I know so many stories that happen in French in London because that's my life. But also it's important to, I think, for people to think about being creative with the brief. Like if you don't speak the language but have a connection to it, it doesn't always have to be about the community. You can think about fantastical project or horror films or a ghost story, something that just connects to that language that has relevance for you. You can just think about how this can work as a writer, and you can be really creative with that.
Yeah, springboard for ideas.
Yeah,
that's great.
I think that's it.
We've got some questions coming in actually that probably makes sense to pick up here, which are about language. Can the story be half in English, half in another language? You have a percentage breakdown, don't you, I think?
Yeah, well, the minimum we'd say we want 51% of the film to be in another language than English. But, we'd prefer if it was mostly in another language. But yeah, the minimum, and also like, of course, the stories do have to be UK set. So we'd expect that it would make sense for some of the dialogue to be in English, but the idea is that the story is told primarily in another language.
In another language. And
or it could be, sorry, just to say, it could also be more than one language. I mean,
yeah.
It really depends on the story, but if you have a story about 2 people from different backgrounds, neither of whom speak English, who have married each other or, something like that, then, there could be any number of ways of addressing the creative brief, I think.
Yeah, there just needs to be a genuine, authentic connection to that language and culture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you say you were born and raised in Scotland and didn't really have any connection to the language, could you still apply with like a Scots Gaelic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And also, I mean, not just the connection. at least if there's a reason why that film is in a certain language, there doesn't need to be necessarily a cultural connection. Like, we imagine those are the projects that will be the most instant for people to think of, but at least as long as there is a reason for it not to be in English, then we're happy with that.
Yeah, basically it's not for people to translate their English script into a totally different language. It needs to make
yeah, that's great. We've got some more.
We have many more questions. I see them.
We have more coming in. We may as well pick them up because I think they're all sort of related to this point. How about flashbacks that go into a different country? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. We, completely accept that many of the stories that people might want to tell, even though we would request that they be mainly based in the UK, but considering that a lot of them are going to relate to other countries and other cultures, then there could be flashbacks, or there could be bookends to the story where somebody, we see their life in another country before they arrive, or where they dream of going home and they do so at the end, or any number of other things that I can't think of right now. So yeah, that's absolutely fine. We're looking for things that are sort of mainly set in the UK because there's a couple of reasons really. Partly because we're UK based filmmakers, and so we feel that we can be the most help to projects that are going to mainly shoot here, because we don't necessarily have the right contacts and experience and financing options and so on in literally any other country of the world that it might end up being. The other thing is that, arguably, if a film was all in Mandarin and to be shot entirely in China, then there would be an argument for why that couldn't be made in China with Chinese funding and Chinese producers. So it's kind of the USP of the piece that we're looking at, the real diversity of languages that are spoken in the UK and stories that take place in those languages.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that from our research, 300 languages are spoken in the UK. It's very diverse, and you never see them. Like, actually a lot of the films that you see that are UK films, but often take place not in the UK, they're going to be in another language. And yeah, we feel that there is a lot of scope for stories that take place in the UK, just in another language.
Yeah. Brendan O'Neill's asking about dialectic forms of English like Jamaican patois. Does that count?
Yeah, I mean, this is it's quite complex. For patois, we would accept that, but typically, it's quite controversial in some cases in terms of what has been deemed to be an official language and what hasn't, which are not rules that obviously we have decided. So we would suggest, if people are looking at submitting something in a language or a dialect and they're not quite sure whether it's going to be eligible or whether it's a language or a dialect, for example, that they send us an email and we'd be happy to answer those questions. If something's not officially recognized as a language, it does slightly limit what we're able to do with that project in the longer term. But equally, we're aware that in some instances that is quite a controversial decision, which is might even change within the next couple of years or whatever. So I think we'd rather be asked the question and take a look probably at that project anyway and see if it merits support, through one of its other strengths, for example.
Brilliant. Okay, we're getting questions coming in about the career level of the writers and directors you're looking for. Where are you pitching that? Where exactly would you like people to be in their careers to be eligible for the fund?
Well, we try to be inclusive. Like, we want people to apply to be working filmmakers. It can be up and coming filmmakers, obviously, but we're working with distribution partners, Curzon in the UK and Sharad for international sales agent. And the idea is that they would like want to invest their or take these projects on board. So basically, it's not for junior, like entry level filmmakers. That being said, would be more flexible with the writer. Like, we've tried to create the entry requirements to be inclusive and to basically just be able to prove that you are working in the industry and that your work has been to some extent recognized. And we've already like made some adjustments. It's the first year we run this, so we're also learning from it. But so yeah, so the idea is that as the writer, you've written scripts before, that this is not your very first project and that your work has got some attention. But you can come from a theater background, a TV background, having only made shorts, and this will be your first feature. We're open to all of these things.
That's brilliant. And I think you've got some quite detailed criteria on your website as well. And Alex has popped that into the chat if people want to have a look at that as well. I think it's
I would say that, for instance, the Oscar eligible, it's not that you have to be nominated to the Oscar, is that you have to have been to a Oscar qualifying festival, which is a very long list available on the British Council website, I think.
We have a link to it, actually.
Yeah, we have a link to it. So like it's quite broad, the festivals. And also we didn't want to only, because we know that festivals can be a bit hit and miss, so we also included if your film actually won some awards in some smaller festivals, if your short film won some awards in smaller festivals, or if your short film didn't get into any festivals but you put it online and people really responded to it. So these are ways that we try to include, to be inclusive, while also working with industry professionals.
Yeah,
I think I just add, I think if you feel that you're quite close to meeting the eligibility requirements, but not you're not sure or you're not quite there, send us an email. Typically, if it's close, we'd probably rather receive your application than not. And as Manon says, those the list of eligibility requirements, they were intended to make sure that we work with people who are experienced enough to sort of go the distance on a feature film development, and for us to have a strong chance of financing the film, because we don't just want to develop a film, we want to make it too. They are intended to be hopefully broad enough, but it's quite difficult to write enough sets of rules that are going to totally fit everybody. So
yeah, it's always really, really challenging. I know that. Okay, I think we're starting to get some questions in now about the materials that people need to supply. So will we have a chat about that? What are you looking for? What do people need to send to you for you to be able to make a decision?
So if people go to our website, which is, it's already in the chat, but it's bannertongsfilms.co.uk, there's a section that's called Apply, and there's a chance to download the application form. So they just need to fill that application form and send it back to us via email. In the application form, they will need to include a 300-word synopsis, a treatment that is minimum 1,500 words. However, if they already have a draft, or if they have a longer treatment, they've been working on the project for a bit longer and they have like a longer piece of writing, they can just submit that instead of the 1,500 words. Obviously information about themselves, their eligibility for the scheme, and also a paragraph about why they want to write this project and why they're choosing that specific language, which is basically what we've been discussing until now, what the connection is, what the reason for picking that specific language for this specific story is.
Brilliant.
We've tried to make it quite painless, but we know what it's like writing application forms. We write a lot of them.
Yes, it's always fun, isn't it? And you want all those materials in English at application stage, is that right? Yes.
However, if they do have something that's in another language, like a script that has already been written that's in the other language, they can also supply that. But obviously, for the first round of applications, we want to kind of be able to read everything in English, be able to read it basically.
Yes. Yeah.
But if something gets down to sort of a close to being on the shortlist, and we can see that there's a much longer piece of writing that's in another language, if it's, you know, a film team or filmmaker that we're really keen on, and we like the project pitch that is in the application form that is in English, then potentially at that point we might look at translating that longer piece of work to give us a better idea. So if you have it, please feel free to send it, but you don't have to write anything into another language at this stage, unless you particularly want to.
Brilliant. Okay, that's really clear. How about people who have a producer attached already? So they've been working on this project for a while and they've already got a producer collaborator. How would that work? Can it work?
Yes, absolutely. If that producer is open to collaborating with us to help move the project forward, then absolutely we would encourage you to apply. The flip side of that is it's not an application process that requires you to have a producer. So I think if you're already working with somebody, and particularly if they're somebody that maybe you've done previous shorts with, and you know there's a strong relationship there, then that's not something that we would want to split up. But if you have a project, either that is maybe a new idea that you've come up with to apply to this scheme with, or something that you're already working on with whom you don't have a producer yet, then that's absolutely fine. And I think in those circumstances, we would probably discourage you from going and finding a producer just to sort of make your application look stronger, because it's really not a requirement at this point.
Brilliant. That's great. And then we're getting questions in about the selection process. So could you talk us through how the sort of shortlisting and ultimate selection process will work? And you're going to have a workshop, I was reading as well, which sounds really interesting.
Yeah, so basically you have until the 1st of December to submit your application. The form is on the website and you can send additional materials if you want to. And then we will assess the applications, both ourselves and with our partners, Sharad and Curzon, and we will pick a short list of up to 6 projects. It might be less if we don't believe that, you know, we want more than them, but this is basically roughly 6 projects that we feel are really strong and want to learn more about and work more with the filmmakers. For this short list of projects, we'll organize a day of workshop, which in the current context is likely to be Zoom workshop, but it will be an opportunity for the shortlisted projects to, you know, the filmmakers to meet each other and network, and also I'll probably be running that side of things, you know, to work, to have some feedback from me and from other guest industry professionals on their projects. And then there will be a panel with the rest of the team and the partners, where you can pitch your project, and then, you know, we will make a decision with the panel about the winner. There will be a minimum of 1 winner for the £10,000 grant award. But basically we can pick more than 1 project if we decide, but this is not something that we will commit to at this stage. There will be 1 winner, but this is all we're committing to for now. Obviously, if we fall in love with more than 1 project, then we can continue with more than 1.
I see that as a challenge to filmmakers, to overwhelm you with brilliant ideas so that you makes a challenging decision process for you. Great.
We want them to bankrupt us.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
You heard that here. Jack Tarling, he wants to give away all his development money. Brill. Okay. So let's see, are there any other questions relating to that could be useful to pick up here. Getting questions around like genre that might result in like higher budgets, so things like sci-fi and period drama. Are you open to receiving sort of more challenging to the budget type projects?
We're definitely open to period, to sci-fi. That, you know, there is no limitations really in terms of the type of project, as long as it's set mainly in the UK and mainly in a language which isn't English, and with the filmmakers based in the UK. Those are really the only kind of more strict criteria. We would probably suggest that, you know, Lady Macbeth, for example, did period, but it was also made on like £500,000. So try and be smart about it. You know, there have also been incredible sci-fi films like, you know, Primer or whatever, which was probably made for about 20 grand. We can be more ambitious than that with budget. We're probably not going to be making, you know, the equivalent of $100 million studio movie. So I think be realistic about what a first or second time, you know, feature film is likely to be, unless, you know, I don't know exactly who's on this call. So obviously, you know, if Boon John Ho is on here, then, you know, maybe we can look at a bigger budget. But you know, be realistic about what other filmmakers are typically receiving at your level. And if you can present us with something that, you know, roughly works, and it may be that through a development process, you know, maybe there's an idea which we love and it does feel a bit big, but maybe we can work in development to make sure that the core of the idea is protected, but in a way that can actually be done much more realistically for the type of budget that we can raise and that would be appropriate for that filmmaker.
That's really clear. Thanks, Jack.
But just to add, in terms of the genre, that there is this film called His House on Netflix at the moment, which is mostly in English, but also in another language, which in Dinka, and it's a horror film as well. It's really interesting, you know, to think about what films could have fit for us. You know, like it would have to be primarily in another language, but this use of horror to tell a very authentic story is really interesting at the moment, and obviously performing really well. Period drama also, like Jack said, would work. But yeah, absolutely open to all genres as long as it's fiction and live action.
Well, we're talking about like example films. Do you want to give us some examples of films that have done this sort of thing really well, the sort of thing that you're looking for that's already out there?
Yeah, it's actually a surprisingly difficult question to answer, which is, you know, one of the reasons why we wanted to launch this, because when we started looking at it, it is kind of crazy when you consider that I think there's more than 9 million people living in the UK who were born in other countries. There are also, you know, around 12 indigenous languages spoken in the UK other than English. And then not only that, there are all the people that are connected to those people. So like we said, it doesn't have to be that you yourself were born in another country, or that you speak Gaelic, or, you know, anything like that. But it might be that everybody at your workplace does, and so you're surrounded by it, and that's an experience that you want to explore. Or it might be that you have married into a family that speaks another language, or, you know. But there have been remarkably few examples, because English is such a dominant language in this country, and, you know, in much of the rest of the world as well. But to properly answer your question, yes, we do have examples. A lot of these examples are films which would almost fit our mold, and so that might help people to think about what they could do that would advance that a stage further. So we're definitely really big fans of the films Lilting and Mogul Mowgli. So just for those who might not be familiar, Lilting came out in 2014. It's a film starring Ben Whishaw, and he plays a character whose male partner, who was of Chinese Cambodian descent, has died. And so it's about Ben Wishaw's character having to go and meet this man's mother, who doesn't speak any English at all, and so he hires an interpreter. So it's really about a person, you know, it's about two people really coming to terms with their grief and learning about each other, because they had never met each other before, and they're each learning something more about the person who's died than maybe they knew, and this is all through an interpreter. So that's that film is, I'm guessing here, but I would say it's more like 60-40 in favor of English. But if you had just flipped a few more of those scenes into Mandarin, then, you know, that would have really worked for us, and it's a film we love. Mogul Mowgli was released about 2 or 3 weeks ago, just as cinemas were shut down again, so people might not be quite as familiar with it, but it is a really brilliant piece of work, directed by Bassam Tariq and starring, co-written and co-produced by Riz Ahmed. And so he plays a Pakistani rapper who kind of seems on the cusp of having his big break, until he's struck down by an autoimmune disease, which then triggers a series of hallucinations. So a lot of the dialogue in that film is in Urdu, and again, the percentages aren't quite right for us, but you could, you know, when you see the film, you could very easily imagine that more of it might have been in Urdu. Another film that would be worth a look is The Library Suicides. So that's a Welsh language film. And there are actually quite a number of Welsh language films, some of which have been quite high profile, Oscar nominations, etc. Those ones are a little bit longer ago, whereas The Library Suicides is 2016. But that's like a twisty psychological thriller set in a library. And then, yeah, I mean, we already touched upon His House. So with His House, it's about 2 South Sudanese refugees who've quite recently arrived in the UK, and they've experienced significant trauma, both in terms of their journey to the UK and in terms of the circumstances that they were fleeing. And so they move into a new home in the UK and find that their house is kind of haunted essentially by the trauma that they've experienced. Again, most of that film plays out in English, and I think it's worth pointing out that English is actually the official language of South Sudan, but they speak many other languages there, and so at points in the film they do speak in Dinka, which is one of the local languages. And I think one thing we've observed with films like His House and with films like Brick Lane from a few years ago, which is a very high profile, successful film, but we, you know, it's not a criticism of the film, it's more a criticism of the market and society more generally, but we would kind of question whether it's entirely authentic for those characters. You know, in the case of Brick Lane, you would expect really them probably to speak Bengali at home, but even when they're at home, you know, not interacting with British society at that moment in time, they're still speaking in English. We would love to find, you know, a way forward in terms of, you know, cinema, where if it's more authentic for them to be speaking their own language, that's what they would be doing, and that film would still have a commercial life. So that's maybe one of the reasons why there haven't been a huge number of examples. there are a couple more, but which we can go into if people are still.
Yeah. And even outside the UK, there's a slow rise in films in other languages. I mean, already Manon mentioned The Tribe, which is in Ukrainian Sign Language, which was a really interesting project that did extremely well in the marketplace, in the mainstream marketplace and space. And there's also another film which won quite a few awards at Sundance this year and should be out for release in early 2021 from A24, so we're probably going to see it, called Minari, and it's set in the US, but it's a story of a South Korean family in the 80s who are kind of like searching for the American dream, and they speak South Korean between themselves. The majority of it is in South Korea because it's mostly about the family and the relationships within the family, so it makes sense that they would speak South Korean or Korean between themselves, and then obviously when they interact with the outside world, with outside characters, they speak English. But that's something else that was quite surprising to see, how a distributor like A24, which is very mainstream, selected something like that. It's a really good signal for us.
Yeah, no, it's great. And do you think then, I mean, my perception, and I don't know if it's accurate, but it seems to be that people are more open to watching subtitled content at the minute anyway, because of the proliferation of streamers and Netflix and all the brilliant content that we're getting from all over the world on platforms like Netflix. So yeah, it feels
it's
like
funny because when you're not born speaking in English, you always watch stuff with subtitles. And even sometimes when I watch stuff in English, I put closed caption if it's like in the US in a totally different accent that I don't really know. So yeah, I feel like people love, like English speaking people have been just like watching stuff with subtitles now. And obviously this year is the year that Parasite won at the Oscar.
It's so long ago, but it is the same year.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, so it's definitely like a shift in the marketplace that like bigger players are interested in, and it was great for us to see that Curzon and Sharad wanted to back this initiative, because it shows a genuine commercial interest in this project.
Yeah. So can you tell me a bit about how they're involved and how that relationship works? Because that's really exciting, I think, that you've got those partners on board.
Yeah, it's really cool. So Sharad, I don't know if many people are familiar with them, but they're a brilliant international sales agents. They are based in Paris, but they're working on British films a lot. For instance, they're selling Mogul Mowgli, and also Host, which was the horror made in lockdown, which did extremely well, by Rob Savage. And they were selling I Lost My Body, which did really well in Cannes a few years ago, the animation. And Curzon, I think most people will know about them, but they are basically the leaders in the UK of for foreign language films distribution, and even our house distribution within the UK. And both of them a first look deal on the project, and will be helping us select the projects, and also informing us and helping the project have a clear pathway to market, which again, as I was mentioning earlier, it's such a rare thing for something in development. Sometimes you develop a project, but then you don't really have a clear way of actually getting it made, and you kind of develop it in a vacuum, whereas having them on board from such an early stage is going to be so great to actually really understand what works in the market, what doesn't work, what small things you can do to actually make the project work internationally and within the UK distribution scene.
Yeah, it's brilliant. No, I think it's so exciting that they're attached to this and are going to be involved right from the beginning. We're getting loads of questions coming in, so I'm just going to jump in and I'm going to just go through them. So somebody is asking about if the writer is based in the UK and the director lives in a different country, but won the best film director from the British Film Award from the British Film Festival. Would that work? So if the writer's in the UK, the director is based in a different country, but won an award.
If the writer's in the UK, the rights to the project are kind of UK owned, I think we would take a look at that, and I don't think we would knock it out entirely on that basis. whenever we're sort of assessing things, we're probably going to be weighing up a whole number of factors. But if it's a project that seems to have a lot of potential in other areas, then I don't think that would necessarily be a problem. Although, as you can tell, we're sort of all on the call right now. We might have to have a further discussion about it afterwards.
I think like generally we try to be as inclusive as we can with that, like while keeping it fair for people, you know, like on this point I would tend to agree with Jack that, you know, if you have a UK based writer who is writing from experience or has this connection, then, you know, we would want to look at it. I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you, again, like for such questions, you know, you can email us, or, you know, or if you're in doubt, sometimes I used to submit for stuff where I like barely qualified or didn't really qualify. Like, just my advice in life is to go for it, because you never know if you fall in love with it, and we'll let you know if you're not eligible.
Yeah, you don't lose anything, do you?
Yeah.
If you just apply or drop you guys a line. It sounds like you want to say yes, isn't it? You want to be as like open as you possibly can be. So
Exactly.
yeah. Another question here asking about eligibility, saying that they've had films that have been to the Oscars, or I don't know if that's the actual Oscars or Oscar qualifying festivals, but was a VFX compositor on them, not director or writer. Is that valid? I suspect not.
That's a bit of a trickier one, I think. We do take into account other relevant experience, but preferably the credits that make you eligible would be the same credits as what you're applying to do. You know, that experience might help, but on its own, I wouldn't say necessarily sets you up as somebody that is maybe at the right experience level to go through an entire feature film, you know, development process and be financeable to either write or direct, or write and direct the feature. But that's just based on the limited bit of information in the questions. So again, if they're still unsure, they could maybe send us an email with some more details.
Yeah,
I think it would, again, like, we just want to make sure that it's people who have experience in that role. So if your only credit is as in VFX, that would be challenging. If you have other writing or writing directing credit, but your eligibility is in another role, then yeah, email us.
Yeah. If in doubt, reach out to the team. That almost rhymed. If in doubt, reach out. Another question here. Do you want a treatment with a minimum of 1,500 words, or a story outline with a minimum of 1,500 words? As you say on the website. Treatment or outline? Are you distinguishing between them?
Not especially. We basically, maybe if I give a bit of background, it might help. So we didn't want a situation where, like, we're trying to reduce the workload for everybody, basically. So if you're writing something that's a completely new idea, you read about this initiative and it sparked an idea and you thought you'd like to apply, then we need a minimum of about 1,500 words, giving us a sense of the beginning, middle, and end of the story. And hopefully that's enough for us to get a sense of your ability as a writer as well. So we felt like that was the minimum really that we would need to try and assess on. But we didn't want to be in a position of making everybody write a 15-page treatment, because, you know, unfortunately, the majority of people on the call we're not going to be able to support, and we know that it's a lot of work. Mm-hmm. On the flip side of that, if you already had a project and you're already partway down the road with it and already had a 10-page treatment or a screenplay or whatever, then we don't want to force you to go back and have to write a specifically 1,500 page you know, story outline. So submit, you know, what you already have, if you already have something, as long as we've got at least 1,500 words of your writing, which does give a real sense of kind of the full narrative, beginning, middle, and end. Then that's enough for us to assess on. I think different people have slightly different terminology in terms of what exactly constitutes an outline, what constitutes a treatment, etc. So I wouldn't worry yourself too much about that.
Yeah, just a prose description of the narrative in whatever form, 1,500 words. Great. Brendan O'Neill is asking, are adaptations of existing IP, such as a novel, possible?
Yes, but if as long as the rights are available.
Yeah.
So you probably just call the publisher and check. And then you don't need to acquire the rights. That could be part of the producer support, but obviously we wouldn't want to support something that's not available.
Great. Is there anything specific you're looking for or that would stand out? It's what everybody wants to know. Yeah.
It's difficult, isn't it?
It's really tough because in one sense, when you know, like there's nothing better than the feeling of picking up something that's really exciting, really unusual, that you could have never predicted, or just a really specific story from somebody who has a perspective that probably nobody else could have, or those things are always really exciting. I could reel off 10, 15 different like mini concepts, but the thing is, they would have to be done really well, and just because I said it wouldn't make it any good at all. So it would be difficult to specify a type of project, I think.
No, fair enough. Can a writer or director be attached to more than one project?
I think we said 2 projects maximum per person.
Yeah, so it's fine to either submit to yourself, or maybe you might be one where you're the lead applicant and another one that you're attached to as a co-writer, or maybe you write and produce and you're a writer on one and a producer on the other one, or something like that. But we don't want to see your name cropping up more than twice.
Fair enough. I can't speak my parents' native language, but my dad is a translator. Could he come on board the project at a later stage, and can I submit in English for now?
You can submit in English for now. I can't guarantee that your dad will get the translator job, because if the shortlist is a lot of different languages, we'll probably be working with a translation company. But yes, you can submit in English for now.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, we'd definitely encourage that person to apply, and then we would just look at exactly how it would work later if it was a project we were interested in.
Fantastic. Can your film be a work in progress or short version in progress?
We haven't discussed this before.
I mean, well, it depends what they mean by work in progress. I mean, this is a development, it's development support. So frankly,
it's all work in progress.
Everything's going to be a work in progress. But if what they mean is that they've already shot half the film and need completion money for post or something like that, then no. And we're not looking to make a short film, but maybe if you'd already written a short and you were suggesting that the same premise would expand well into a feature film, and if you were able to give us your outline, as we discussed previously, of a minimum of 1,500 words of how it could be a feature narrative, but then if you wanted to attach the short film script that you'd already written so that we could go, oh, okay, that's how they write dialogue, and that's how they break up action with their dialogue, and how they use scene headings and so on, as a kind of writing sample that relates to the piece, that would be fine. But we're not looking to actually develop or make a short film.
No. But there could be people who've made a short that they're looking to expand out into a feature project.
Yeah.
That kind of.
As long as we get a sense of what the feature narrative would be, because some shorts, need a lot of reinvention to make that work well. In fact, I'd probably say most of them do. But if you've got a plan for that makes sense, then yeah, absolutely.
I think I think it's the same person who said it's a short 30 minutes in post-production, and we have a feature script. I mean, we would consider the feature script and then take a view. Basically, you can tell us about the shorts, but it's mostly going to be about it's basically we're judging on the story, and you as and your connection to the story, and you as a filmmaker. So it doesn't, it doesn't hurt that you have a short, but that's not why we would select you. If that makes sense. And kind of the same with the VFX producer. I feel we kind of answered this already. Like if you have people attached, let us know, but it's not what we're basing the decision on. Like what we're interested in is the story and the team.
Brilliant. Will this initiative run annually?
I hope so.
I hope so, yeah. We don't know yet. We have to see how this goes and
The first one first.
how to fund it next time, but would be great. We can't guarantee this, so if you have an idea and you're not sure you can apply before 1st December, definitely apply, because we can't guarantee it's going to run again, but we'd like it to.
There's a question about how many applications you've had so far and how many you expect. I mean, you just don't know with this kind of thing, do you? I mean, it's as somebody who deals with lots of funds taking applications, it's very difficult to predict. So
yeah, and it's the first time we run it, so we really don't know.
No idea. So I think just assume that everything's very competitive. I think that's the way to go. Can the film be shot in the UK but set, for example, on an alien planet? So this is a sci-fi question again. So yes, I guess is the answer to that. Is it?
Yeah, I think it can be. It would just be a case of how you're framing that and how it's relevant to what we're doing. But I think there could be a really interesting way of doing something with that potentially.
Brill. And then there's still questions coming in. You guys are so popular. If the project receives development support but then doesn't go into production, what do you retain in terms of rights and fees?
Okay, so if we give you the grant, and then obviously the idea is that we select a project, then we want to, develop it and finance it. If we develop it and eventually it goes into turnaround, so we drop the project, the rights will revert back to you. So we don't have rights, and you'll have to repay the production investment on first day of principal photography, with the development premium of 20%. That we can discuss that in your writers agreement, but that would be the standard development.
And to turn around clause would be worked into the agreement.
Yeah, so like if we don't manage to set up the film, but like we try for a few years before we stop.
That's the whole point, isn't it? That's why you're doing. Just let the cat out there.
Yeah, just for anybody who's maybe less familiar with what exactly is meant by a turnaround clause. So it basically means, as Manon says, we would work with you, we would continue to develop the project, and we would do our best to finance that project. But the development agreement that you would sign with us would have a period of time after which those rights would revert back to the writer. If we haven't managed to find a way forward with it, and if you don't want to continue working with us for maybe longer anyway, and at that point, if you go and get it made somewhere else, then we just ask that basically the money that we spent on developing with you is repaid to us, but only from the budget of the film when you actually make it. So it's not going to be,
it's not from you.
not going to be you personally.
Yeah.
Great. Will we talk a bit about what the development award can cover? Is it purely for writing, or can it cover other related costs like research, travel for meetings, casting? What's within the?
So the focus of it's a development award. So we're thinking primarily would go into paying the writer to go either from the treatment to a draft, or from a first draft to a production ready draft, for instance. Then we'll assess on a project to project basis if you have other needs like casting, budgeting, and stuff like that. We can look into that with you, but the aim of the award is to develop the script.
Yeah, first and foremost, writing fees.
Yeah.
And then Final question we've got. Oh, go on, Manon.
It's just because I've thought about a way to help with the type of projects we would be looking for without putting ideas into people's mind. It's like, for instance, the BFI long lists have been announced this week, or are being announced this week. And, it's good for you. This is going to be an independent film. You're all probably first-time filmmakers or second-time filmmakers. So it's probably a good idea to look at what is working at the moment. Like, of course, there are a lot of personal stories about music. Horror films are really a big hit at the moment. It's not to narrow your mindset, like we want you to just apply with what you think is best, but if you're not sure and if you're trying to come up with an idea, a good way is to research what's doing well, because probably our distribution partners are going to have that in mind when they assess the project themselves. So that will be part of it.
Do the market research, basically. Yeah.
But that, I think Manon's point is especially what's coming through a list like the BFI long list, for example, because we can all say that superhero movies are doing well or whatever, but most of them have a budget of $200 million plus. So it's a case of focusing on what is being made in the UK and in other countries by sort of first and second time filmmakers, typically, if that's the level that you're at.
Yeah, in that independent space. Yeah. Got one last question asking, can the film be set 30% in the UK, 70% in another country, assuming the idea is attractive to you? Would that be possible? Or
it gets a little tricky at that sort of split. It's not quite the aim, I would say. It's tricky because we don't like to turn something down on those, on percentages. But I think there's a question mark over whether really it's a film that sort of needs our support, or maybe, I know all films always need all the support because it's really hard to get any film made. I totally get that, but there might start to be a question about whether it's going to be better to be set up with producers in that country and mainly financed out of that country.
Yeah, I guess the way for you, for this question to think about is like, we would want to facilitate the production or produce the project ourselves as UK-based producer. So we want the film to be primarily shot in the UK, to be like financed out of the UK. But yeah, again, generally I would say apply, and then we'll tell you if it's not. Unless you have to write the whole thing from scratch, and then email us.
Brilliant.
So is this session being recorded? I love this question stuff, Jeff. I think it's great.
It is being recorded, and we're going to put it on our YouTube channel hopefully soon. One final question from me. We're all still locked up at home. I'm bored, looking for film, TV, book recommendations. What have you been watching and enjoying recently? Any tips for us all to pass the time in these dark, horrible nights?
Any film we mentioned in today's Q&A, especially Mogul Mowgli, which is it should be still on release, and it's easy to find, and His House as well, which is easy to find on Netflix. I just remembered I also watched Mangrove on the BBC, which is amazing. So definitely that. And then whatever makes you happy, because it's dark times. So if watching Murder, She Wrote and Bob's Burgers makes you happy, it makes me happy. Good for it.
Yeah, my favorite film recently that I watched was Mogul Mowgli. Like, genuinely, I watched it after we've been talking about it so much, and I just loved it.
I'm having that
anything.
mind blank moment where it's like I've never seen a film ever. But obviously I think we've covered quite a bit of work already today. So.
You have. There've been lots of great recommendations peppered throughout this whole conversation, so I'm sure people can go and look those up. You should do a watch list for.
Well, actually, that's something to mention. You can follow us on Twitter. at Mother Tongues, and Chiara has been amazing at posting about such films that we mentioned when they release and how they would fit or not the LGBT criteria that we have, like comparing to this initiative. So yeah, so follow us on Twitter and you'll have more recommendations from us.
Films we've not even had a chance to speak about yet, like Listen, which is in Portuguese, and The Receptionist, Taiwanese, that film, I forget, and Menashe, which was in Yiddish, is a great film, and Ghosts, which was by Nick Broomfield, about the Morecambe Bay Chinese couple picker tragedy, which was mainly in Mandarin. Yeah, there's tons of other great films that you can look up if you want to get your head into the zone for this.
That sounds great. I think we'll have to do, maybe we do our network and chill recommendations every evening. Maybe you could do a network and chill takeover for us with your recommendations. I think that would be great. Thank you very much for your time. The applications close on 1st of December. If people want to get in touch with you, they should check out the website. Alex has popped it in the chat. Get in touch with any questions. Now everybody's seen you, they've seen how friendly you are. That's that's nice. Brill, anything else you want to say to everybody just before we wrap up?
I have something that I'd like to say, that obviously there will be one person who gets this award, but what I think is really exciting about this initiative, and thank you everyone who joined tonight, is that it's just starting this conversation about what is the story that your film needs to be told in, you know, and for people to think, like, to not just default go to English, to just rethink what is like the most meaningful stories, what are those stories that we're not talking about, and just think about it. And, you know, even if your application is not successful, I feel there is a big shift in that direction, and hopefully it gives you some ideas for you to be creative around that and to find other avenues regardless.
Real. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Lovely chatting to you, and thanks everybody for joining. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jess. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks. Thanks, Russ.
Thank you, Russ.